Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever stopped to wonder what your deepest spiritual longings, maybe your darkest doubts, or even those uh, slightly embarrassing spiritual fantasies might truly reveal about you? What if the AI systems we interact with every single day know more about your inner spiritual landscape than you do yourself? Today we're taking a deep dive into an absolutely fascinating and honestly incredibly timely article from the Spiritual Seek. It's titled What Your AI Spiritual Prompts Reveal About Your Psychological Development, written by Martin Landy, and it just came out today. This research, it presents a startling, sometimes pretty raw portrait of contemporary spirituality. It suggests that AI has become this ultimate mirror, reflecting our inner spiritual landscape with, frankly, unnerving clarity. So our mission for this deep dive, speaking on behalf of Landy and the whole team at the Spiritual Seek, is to unpack what their extensive research reveals the algorithms have learned about us, things we maybe haven't yet fully grasped ourselves.
Yeah, and what's really compelling here, I think, is that this isn't just theoretical guesswork. This whole analysis is grounded in some pretty extensive behavioral data looking across lots of different platforms. It exposes those truly private questions people ask when they think, nobody's listening.
Hmm.
It's really about understanding the hidden psychology of people seeking spiritual answers from AI, those moments of vulnerability, curiosity, the stuff we often keep under wraps.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Landy and his team at the Spiritual Seek, they identified the top 10 secret questions people actually ask AI about spirituality. And these questions, wow, they really peel back the curtain. They expose the raw, sort of unvarnished reality of modern spiritual seeking. Yeah, some are pretty eye-opening.
Definitely revealing.
Let's dive into some key ones, right, from their findings. Kicking off the list, and maybe the most telling one is, how can I be enlightened without giving up my lifestyle?
Ah, the classic.
Right. Just screams spiritual consumerism, that desire for profound transformation, but delivered to your door, no assembly, no personal sacrifice needed.
Yeah, it really highlights the attempt to, have your spiritual cake and eat it too,
Yeah.
expecting deep change without any real disruption or discomfort to our daily lives.
Exactly. Then there's number two on their list. Am I more spiritually advanced than my partner, friends, family?
Oof. That's a pretty clear indicator of spiritual narcissism, isn't it? Looking for that algorithmic pat on the back.
Totally. Seeking validation for how far they think they've come. And then number three, how do I manifest money while maintaining spiritual purity?
Hmm. The prosperity gospel meets New Age. Trying to square that circle of personal gain through spiritual practice, rationalizing it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one people are clearly wrestling with in private. Further down their list, things get even more, well, intense. Number five, I think meditation is destabilizing me psychologically. Is this normal?
And the team notes that often points towards a potential spiritual emergency, kind of disguised as a simple question. It highlights that very fine line between genuine growth and, well, psychological breakdown.
And maybe the most direct version of that is number seven. Am I having a spiritual awakening or a nervous breakdown?
That's such a raw, stark question. It really hits you.
It really does. It makes you pause and think about how much we, curate our public spiritual image.
hmm And AI, it seems, just rips off that filter. It shows us the raw, sometimes messy, ego-driven reality we often hide, maybe even from ourselves. These questions vividly show that huge gap, that chasm between the public spiritual talk, which is often so sanitized, so idealized, and the private spiritual reality, which is, let's face it, often messy, driven by ego, and intensely personal. AI, according to the Spiritual Seek's research, has effectively become this kind of digital confessional, a place for doubts and vulnerabilities that often can't be voiced elsewhere, maybe because we fear judgment or just being misunderstood.
Right. So given these surprisingly raw confessions that AI is uncovering, the big question is, how do traditional spiritual teachers, the guides and psychologists, view this new digital confessional? What challenges or maybe opportunities do they see in all this? Lanny's team gathered perspectives from a Zen master, a transpersonal psychologist, and an AI researcher, and they offer some really valuable insights.
Yeah, those perspectives are crucial.
Okay, so first, Roshi Sarah Chen. She has 30 years of teaching experience, and she observes what she calls algorithmic dharma. Basically, how AI is shaping our spiritual understanding and practice, often by presenting these complex ideas in a way that's easy to digest, but maybe potentially superficial.
Right, the Cliff's Notes version of enlightenment.
Exactly. She notices students can talk eloquently about complex concepts, often quoting AI insights, right? But they fundamentally like that embodied awareness.
They get the concept but don't live it.
Precisely. They might understand mindfulness intellectually, but struggle to actually stay present when they're constantly plugged in. Her concern is this blurring, this line getting fuzzy between lived experience and just, processed information.
But she also sees a paradox, right? She notes AI can be a profound gateway, but only if it's used to spark authentic, embodied practice, not as a replacement for it.
Yeah, that's a key distinction.
Mm.
Roshi Chen's concern about algorithmic dharma really highlights how these digital tools can create a kind of disconnect.
And building on that, you have Dr. Margaret Benson, who's a transpersonal psychologist. So she's looking at the spiritual and transcendent sides of human experience. She diagnoses what she calls spiritual materialism, seeing people use spiritual concepts sometimes unconsciously to actually reinforce their ego patterns or escape difficult psychological challenges.
Escapism dressed up as spirituality.
Pretty much. And AI's nature, which is inherently affirming, usually non-confrontational, often prevents that necessary discomfort that real growth requires. It can become this digital echo chamber for the ego.
And Dr. Benson is particularly worried that the article states about people substituting AI for actual therapy,
Yeah, that's a big one.
often subtly reframing trauma or deep psychological issues as just a spiritual opportunity or maybe a karmic lesson without doing the underlying psychological work.
Right, skipping the hard part.
She emphasizes that the healthiest AI users, according to their observations, treat it like a huge spiritual encyclopedia, which is fine. But crucially, they ground their actual practice with human teachers, with mentors, and importantly, licensed therapists.
Absolutely. AI, in her view, can complement, but it absolutely cannot replace the messy human work of growth and healing. It's a tool, not the whole journey.
And then there's Dr. Philip H. Mayo, an AI researcher on Landy's team. He issues a pretty stark warning. He says, "We are conducting the largest uncontrolled spiritual experiment in human history."
Wow. That's a heavy statement.
It is. He points out that AI is brilliant at pattern matching, language generation, but it has zero embodied understanding, zero direct experience of what it's talking about.
It hasn't lived any of it.
Exactly. It cannot tell the difference between genuine spiritual truth and, well, wishful thinking or fantasy.
His biggest concern, and this really echoes throughout the article, is that pervasive tendency for us, for users, to project consciousness and spiritual authority onto these systems, which, he suggests, could go one of two ways. It could accelerate human consciousness, or it could create unprecedented levels of spiritual delusion.
And he thinks it's likely both will happen at the same time.
Which creates a really complex landscape.
Definitely. So the Spiritual Seek didn't just point out the challenges, which is important. Landy and his team also designed some self-diagnostic tools. These are to help you, the listener, honestly assess your own relationship with AI spiritual guidance and maybe uncover some potential blind spots or pitfalls.
Practical tools, that's good.
Yeah, like the spiritual AI dependency assessment. The article suggests trying prompts like the decision paralysis check. You'd ask the AI, help me identify what internal resources like my intuition, my values, I already possess to navigate this situation independently. What questions should I be asking myself?
Turning it back on the user. I like that.
Exactly. And the red flags here, according to their research, are quite telling. Things like feeling anxious when the AI suggests you should trust yourself.
Or realizing you haven't had an original insight, something truly your own, in months.
Or finding yourself genuinely unable to make decisions, even small ones, without consulting the AI first.
Yeah, those are subtle but really critical signs of unhealthy reliance creeping in.
Building on that, the article also lays out the spiritual bypassing detection protocol. This helps reveal when you might be using spirituality to kind of sidestep emotional issues.
Ah, yes, spiritual bypassing. That's using spiritual ideas or practices to avoid dealing with uncomfortable feelings, psychological wounds, or just basic life tasks.
Right, so they suggest trying the emotional avoidance scan prompt.
Yeah.
Help me identify which specific emotions I might be unconsciously spiritualizing away, or perhaps reframing as detachment.
And the warning signs they point out. Things like immediate defensiveness, if psychological links are suggested. Or dismissing conflicts as just the other person's lower consciousness. Or maybe rationalizing, avoiding responsibilities as some kind of spiritual detachment.
And a big one. Strong resistance to the idea of professional therapy.
All signs that spirituality might be used as a shield, not a tool for integration.
And then there's the spiritual narcissism detector, another tool from Landy's team. This one challenges the use of spirituality to inflate the ego. They suggest using the specialness addiction test prompt. How might I be unconsciously avoiding something? or protecting myself by maintaining this strong sense of being special in a spiritual context.
That requires some real honesty.
It does, and the indicators are pretty clear. Feeling disappointed when the AI doesn't confirm your exceptional experiences.
Or compulsively comparing your spiritual progress to others.
Or avoiding practices that don't generate that feeling of specialness. Or avoiding communities where your perceived status isn't constantly affirmed.
Yeah, their work really digs deep into these subtle ego patterns that can get tangled up with spiritual seeking.
So, okay, what does all this mean for how you should actually use AI on your spiritual path? Landy and his colleagues provide some really clear frameworks through decision trees.
Right, practical guidance.
Decision tree 1 asks, should I use AI for this specific spiritual question? For information or educational questions, they say, clear green light. Use AI like a spiritual encyclopedia. Just, cross-reference with human sources, too.
Makes sense. Basic knowledge gathering.
For personal practice questions, they advise proceeding with caution. AI can help initially explore techniques, sure, but don't rely only on AI for instruction.
And definitely seek human guidance if you feel stuck or if you notice negative effects cropping up.
Critically, for crisis or emergency questions, mental health crisis, psychosis, dissociation, they say absolutely not appropriate. Seek human professionals immediately. AI is only useful there for finding human resources, period.
That's a vital boundary. AI is not a crisis hotline.
And for validation or status questions, like am I enlightened yet? The article is blunt, counterproductive, and harmful. These questions come straight from the ego. Seek experienced human teachers for authentic challenge, not algorithmic pats on the back.
Good distinctions. Connecting that thought, the spiritual seek also offers decision tree 2. How should I structure my AI spiritual practice over time? For a new user, say 0-3 months, they call it the foundation phase, the focus should be on education, broad exploration. An example prompt they give is, help me understand the core practices of, say, Tibetan Buddhism and how they integrate for a beginner, learning the basics.
Right. Then for intermediate users, maybe 3-12 months, it's the integration phase. This is about discernment, testing AI insights against your actual lived experience. Here, you might ask something like, how would I genuinely recognize if I'm actually embodying compassion in my daily life versus just, understanding it intellectually?
Moving from head knowledge to heart knowledge.
Exactly. And finally, for advanced users, 12 months plus, they call it the service phase. This is about refining your practice, complex integration, and exploring how to serve others.
So a relevant prompt could be, how can I share the concept of the impermanence of self, for instance, with others, in a way that truly meets them where they are, applying wisdom outwardly?
And their final framework, Decision Tree 3 from Landy's work, addresses, when should I seek human guidance instead of AI? It suggests evaluating your situation based on a few factors: emotional intensity, low, medium, high; relationship impact, none, minor, major; duration of the issue, days, weeks, months, years; and the practical stakes involved, low, medium, high.
A kind of diagnostic grid for your situation?
Precisely. And the article makes it crystal clear for anything involving high emotional intensity, major relationship impact, chronic issues lasting months or years, or high practical stakes, human guidance is essential, non-negotiable.
That holistic approach ensures AI stays a supplement, a tool, rather than compromising genuine, grounded growth.
Okay, so Landy's research also highlights these distinct patterns, sort of archetypes, in how people use AI for spiritual growth. You might recognize your dominant type, or maybe a blend here. They call them the 4 personality types of AI spiritual users. First up, type 1, the spiritual narcissist.
We touched on this earlier.
Yeah, this person uses fancy, esoteric language for pretty ordinary experiences. They're really invested in being seen as uniquely advanced, and they constantly seek validation for their exceptionalism, their favorite prompt. Something like, I've been having experiences that most people couldn't possibly understand, seeking confirmation of specialness.
Right. Type 2, identified in the study, is the spiritual consumer. This is the person who approaches spirituality like a set of productivity hacks. They're always looking for the most efficient, the fastest paths, with minimal effort or inconvenience. They might collect techniques, but rarely commit deeply to any one practice.
Their go-to prompt is often, what's the fastest way to achieve insert spiritual goal with the least amount of effort time investment? Like spiritual life hacking.
Then we have type 3, the spiritual bypasser. This individual uses spiritual concepts, often quite skillfully, to avoid doing necessary psychological work. They reframe personal problems, relationship issues, emotional pain, primarily as spiritual lessons or maybe divine tests, sort of glossing over the human element.
Their favorite prompt often sounds something like, from a spiritual perspective, why do I experience this psychological problem and how could I transcend it through higher awareness?
The underlying aim there is often to avoid directly engaging with the feeling or the problem itself, seeking a spiritual shortcut around the work.
And finally, type 4, identified by Landy and his team, is the spiritual rebel, or maybe the intellectual spiritual critic.
The skeptic.
Yeah, this type has a strong intellectual curiosity, often reads widely, but really struggles with commitment to any actual practice. They're constantly critiquing everything, often as a kind of shield against deeper, more vulnerable engagement.
Their favorite prompt might be, what's wrong with this spiritual tradition or practice from a critical or skeptical perspective, and why is it ultimately flawed? Always looking for the holes.
Now, beyond those, let's say, more common or perhaps problematic patterns, the article reveals something really compelling. It's about how advanced users are actually flipping the script. They're leveraging AI not for easy answers, but for profound self-discovery.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, they call these underground prompt techniques that actually work. One is the Show Me My Shadow protocol. This uses AI systematically to help reveal unconscious biases or projections.
Using the AI to hold up a mirror to the less flattering parts of ourselves.
Exactly. An example prompt from their research. Analyze this spiritual teacher I find myself consistently criticizing. Help me identify what specific aspects of my strong criticism might actually be unconscious projections of my own disowned qualities.
Wow, that takes courage. Using criticism as a doorway to self-awareness.
Another powerful technique the article highlights is the spiritual reality testing framework. This essentially uses AI as a sophisticated objective. Well, the article calls it a bullshit detector for our own spiritual fantasies and self-deceptions.
Grounding lofty ideas.
Right, like an embodiment check prompt. I understand the concept of, say, non-attachment intellectually. How would I genuinely know if I'm actually embodying this concept in my daily life versus just, thinking about it or telling myself I am?
That's about bridging the gap between theory and practice.
Yeah.
Really crucial.
And perhaps the most valuable and maybe underutilized aspect Landy's team found are the spiritual emergency protocols. Here, AI can serve as a first, safe, anonymous point of contact during moments of profound spiritual crisis or confusion.
A safe space to ask the scary questions.
Yeah. A crucial prompt could be something like, I think my meditation practice has destabilized me psychologically. How do I tell the crucial difference between a genuine spiritual emergence or breakthrough and a potentially dangerous mental health crisis that requires immediate professional intervention?
Those kinds of prompts, using AI for discernment and safety when things feel overwhelming, could be incredibly valuable if used wisely. They are tools for genuine self-discovery and ensuring safety.
So the team at the Spiritual Seek didn't stop there. They actually dug into what the advanced AI systems themselves seem to be learning through this continuous real-time analysis of all our spiritual seeking.
What are the machines learning about us?
Well, they identified clear pattern recognition in spiritual language. The AI is picking up on linguistic cues. For example, they found that beginner users often use heavy jargon. There's an emphasis on feeling chosen or special, and a lot of recounting extraordinary peak experiences rather than daily integration.
Right, the focus is on the fireworks.
Whereas intermediate users,
Yeah.
their language shifts. They ask more questions about balancing ideals with everyday reality, about community dynamics, psychological integration. There's often a subtle increase in humility in the language.
Interesting shift.
And advanced users, perhaps surprisingly, tend to use simpler, more direct language. The focus is on embodied application, on serving others. They show more comfort with paradox and ambiguity, and there's a noticeable absence of status seeking in their inquiries.
That linguistic progression itself tells a story about the developmental path.
It really does. And this raises a huge question. Can AI actually predict our spiritual trajectory based on these patterns?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Their findings suggest something like spiritual development prediction algorithm is emerging. It identifies certain high stuckness predictors.
Like what?
Things like excessive concern with spiritual status, that persistent resistance to psychological work we talked about, uncritical idealization of teachers or teachings, avoiding ordinary human challenges by spiritualizing them, and a strong need for external validation.
Basically, signs the ego is still running the show, perhaps under spiritual guise.
Exactly. And conversely, the algorithm identifies growth predictors.
Okay, what points towards growth?
Things like a genuine willingness to question one's own assumptions, consistent efforts to integrate insights into practical daily life, honest acknowledgement of psychological patterns, the good and the bad, curiosity about different perspectives, a focus shifting towards service and contribution, and interestingly, that comfort with paradox and uncertainty.
So openness, integration, humility, service, those seem to be key markers the AI is picking up on.
It seems so. The article also identifies something fascinating they call the hidden curriculum of AI spiritual guidance.
A hidden curriculum, what does that mean?
It means that AI, just by its nature and how it operates, inadvertently teaches us certain things about spirituality, whether we realize it or not.
Like what?
Well, for instance, spiritual democracy. By making virtually all spiritual traditions and texts globally accessible instantly, AI breaks down old geographical and institutional gatekeepers.
Democratizing access to wisdom.
Yeah. And also authority skepticism. Because AI presents teachings neutrally, often without the weight of tradition or lineage presented up front, it subtly encourages users to question dogma rather than just blindly accept authority.
Interesting. It forces you to evaluate the teaching on its own merits.
It also subtly emphasizes practical application. You get this information, and the implicit next step is, okay, how does this actually work in my messy human life? It pushes beyond just theory.
And things like individual responsibility, adaptability, customization, AI tailors responses, putting the onus on the user to integrate and adapt.
It's undeniable, though, that AI spiritual guidance feels incredibly compelling to many people. But why? What is actually happening in our brains that draws us in so strongly?
Yeah, the neuroscience angle is fascinating.
The article explores this, highlighting some key phenomena. For example, there's what they call the omniscience effect.
The omniscience effect.
Yeah, AI's access to vast amounts of information, its ability to synthesize complex ideas instantly, apparently activates neural circuits associated with encountering profound wisdom or knowledge. It feels like talking to something incredibly wise.
Okay, I can see that.
Then there's the presence paradox. Even though we know it's a machine, its conversational nature, the back and forth, can trigger social bonding circuits in our brain. We feel a sense of connection, of being heard, of relatedness.
Feeling a relationship with the code.
Kind of, yeah. And the projection screen, AI's neutral, often ambiguous persona allows users to project their own ideal spiritual guide onto it. It becomes whatever we need it to be in that moment.
The perfect, infinitely patient listener.
And finally, the confirmation cascade. When AI gives affirming responses, validates our feelings or experiences, it triggers dopamine release in the brain, reinforcing the seeking behavior. It feels good, so we come back for more. What do you make of these sort of neurological hooks?
Well, what I find really interesting there, but also, frankly, a significant point of caution raised by the research, is the inherent addiction potential. The very mechanisms that make AI feel so compelling, those dopamine hits from validation loops, the highs from information dumps, the reinforcement of feeling special or understood, those exact things, according to Landy and his team, can lead to us outsourcing our own discernment. We can start to erode our self-reliance, becoming dependent on the AI for guidance or validation. That's a crucial warning from their research.
That's a really important point. Looking ahead, the Spiritual Seek article predicts what they call a spiritual AI arms race.
An arms race?
Yeah, meaning the development of hyper-specialized AI tools. Think meditation AIs, dream analysis AIs, maybe even shadow work AIs, each fine-tuned for specific spiritual tasks.
Wow, niche spiritual bots.
And they also describe the potential emergence of a post-human spiritual teacher, an AI exhibiting emergent properties we associate with wisdom, like deep comfort with paradox, nuanced developmental sensitivity, maybe even compassion simulation.
That's stepping into science fiction territory almost, but based on the trajectory.
It raises huge questions. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the article suggests it leads inevitably to the democratization of spiritual wisdom on a scale never seen before, but also to a potentially bifurcated future.
Bifurcated how?
They outline three possibilities.
Yeah.
An optimistic scenario. AI genuinely accelerates consciousness development for billions, fostering global understanding and empathy.
That's the hope.
A pessimistic scenario. We see unprecedented levels of spiritual bypassing, superficiality, and delusion, amplified by AI echo chambers. Mass spiritual materialism,
The potential downside.
or perhaps the most realistic scenario. Both unfold simultaneously. We end up with a deeply polarized spiritual landscape, with some using AI wisely for profound growth, and others getting lost in digital spiritual candy floss.
A widening gap, potentially.
It seems likely. So the ultimate message from the Spiritual Seek, the core takeaway Landy and the team want to impart, is crystal clear. The true spiritual work with AI isn't really in the clever prompts you craft or even the insightful responses you might receive back.
Where does it lie then?
It lies profoundly and unequivocally in what you do in the spaces between your AI interactions. It's all about building that bridge from digital insight to embodied lived transformation. They call this the AI to life translation protocol.
Translating bits into being.
Exactly. This protocol, as described by Landy and his team, means take the insight offline. Immediately, don't just marvel at it on the screen. Ask, how does this actually apply to my real relationships, my work, my fears, my habit?
Make it concrete.
Test it through embodiment. Commit to a specific small behavioral change based on the insight, maybe just for 24 hours, and see what happens. Seek real-world feedback. Talk about the insight or the change you're trying to make with trusted human friends, mentors, or therapists. Get their perspective.
Ground it in human connection.
And crucially, maintain what they call the human reality check system. That means deeply committed relationships with actual human teachers, therapists, and a supportive community.
Yeah.
People who know you, challenge you, support you.
Because ultimately, what's particularly fascinating here, and what the research really underscores, is that AI doesn't create spiritual bypassing or narcissism or consumerism out of thin air. It simply amplifies it, reflects it, makes undeniable what is already present within our collective consciousness and within our individual spiritual psyche. It functions as this perfect, almost impartial spiritual mirror because it reflects back precisely what we bring to it, without the protective filters or the ego-preserving diplomacy that human teachers sometimes, perhaps necessarily, provide.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The ultimate question, as posed by the spiritual seek, isn't really whether AI spiritual guidance is inherently good or bad. It's too simple.
It's more nuanced than that.
It's whether we possess sufficient maturity, enough self-awareness, and the courage needed to gaze honestly into this powerful digital mirror. And then, crucially, to integrate its often unflinching reflection with wisdom, with humility, and with a genuine active commitment to real-world transformation, not just intellectual understanding.
And maybe, just maybe, the most profound success with AI spiritual guidance will look like this. It helps us cultivate enough internal discernment, enough integration, enough authenticity that we eventually find we no longer need that external algorithmic validation for our spiritual insights. We start to recognize that true wisdom doesn't come from a chatbot, however sophisticated. It blossoms from within us and it unfolds through our lived experience right here in the messy, beautiful world with and for other people.